Another nightmare, she whispered, clutching her head. I thought I'd grown used to them, but they never truly fade. Her chest tightened as the remnants of the dream lingered, dark, suffocating, and unshakable. As sunlight filtered through her window, she let out a weary sigh. Morning already, she murmured, forcing herself out of bed. Walking down the corridor, she glanced at her reflection in the window pane. Her tired eyes met her own gaze, and she whispered to herself, No one can ever know. No one would believe me anyway. A princess pretending to be a maid? It's unheard of. Her footsteps echoed in the quiet hall. We're out of firewood, and eggs, and potatoes, she noted absently. I can't forget to restock those later. She paused for a moment, spinning slowly in the empty corridor. I can't complain. This is the life I chose, a life of freedom, away from the suffocating chains of royalty. But her thoughts turned heavier as she reached the gate. Even though I wanted to change the future, I couldn't. No matter how much I try, it's as though fate mocks my efforts. The gatekeeper greeted her with a wary glance. Princess Vivian, are you well? He asked. She smiled faintly. I'm fine. I absolutely must come back to give my greetings, even if I am the princess. He hesitated, then narrowed his eyes. Did you take anything from the palace this time? Vivian shook her head. No, of course not. But as she stepped past the gates, her thoughts swirled. Once I cross this threshold, I'm no longer Princess Vivian. I am simply Vivian Hesse. Her memories drifted to the day she entered the palace as a 12-year-old, earning the title of princess. Yet, despite the passing years, the title never felt like hers. Being the 16th princess means being invisible, she reflected. I have no power, no influence. Even the servants abandoned me one by one. But in their absence, I found freedom. The freedom to live unnoticed, to slip into town dressed as a maid, to live as she pleased without the weight of royal expectations. She knocked on a familiar door and stepped inside. Norman, are you still asleep? She called. A groggy voice responded. Lucia, you're here already. Norman sat up, her hair messy, rubbing her eyes. Why did you drink so much last night? Lucia asked, handing her a cup of tea. Norman gave a sheepish grin. I write better when I drink. Lucia sighed and shook her head. You really should pace yourself. But I heard you published a new novel. Her tone brightened. Did you save a copy for me? Norman handed her a book. Of course. You helped a lot with its creation. Lucia hugged the book tightly. Finally, I've been waiting for this. You don't know how curious I've been. Norman chuckled lightly. You're exaggerating. I'm not, Lucia replied quickly. As a reader, I've been dying to know how it all turns out. She eagerly flipped through the pages, but her hands froze when she reached the end. Why are you skipping to the last page? Norman asked, amused. Lucia pressed the book against her chest. This is a treasure. I'll keep it safe forever. Norman's expression softened. You're only 18, but you act so grown up sometimes. It worries me. Moments like this remind me you're still young. Lucia's smile wavered slightly. Her thoughts darkened as the nightmare returned to her mind. Young, but not for much longer, she thought. She recalled the haunting vision, her 19th birthday, the heavy chains, the cold carriage, and Count Metten's calculating gaze. No matter how much I try, I can't change what's to come, she thought. But for now, at least, I still have the chance to make a difference in the time that remains. The future loomed over Lucia like an unstoppable force. Even though I've been having visions of what's to come since I was 12, I still can't seem to change anything, she thought, bitterly. Her mind wandered to the past, to moments where her dreams predicted disasters she was powerless to prevent. When she was 13, the mansion was flooded. At 14, an unrelenting winter left her household shivering from a lack of firewood. She had seen it all in her dreams, yet no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't alter the outcomes. Everything I've seen in those dreams has come true, as if my life is following a predetermined script. Her reality, while marginally better than the nightmares, still felt like a loop, endlessly repeating itself. When I turned 15, the constant dreams became unbearable. The headaches they brought were excruciating, like chains keeping me tethered to an unchangeable fate. The worst part? They always circled back to her fate. The death of the king when she turned 19 and her subsequent sale to Count Metten. Lucia wrestled with despair, knowing she couldn't escape the bigger, inevitable events. The realization left her bitter and deeply despondent. At her lowest, she even contemplated starving herself to escape it all. But then the grim thought of dying alone, forgotten in the vast palace, would make her retreat from such plans. "I have to hold on," she whispered to herself. Yet the frustration never left. Lucia carried on with her daily routine, resigned to the belief that time would carry her body forward toward her destiny. It was a mundane existence, punctuated by brief moments of respite with her friend Norman. Norman was a budding romance novelist, and she owed much of her recent success to Lucia. Norman encouraged Lucia to open the last page of the book she had given her. Curious, Lucia flipped to the indicated page and was startled to find an envelope tucked inside. Inside was an astonishing amount of money. "Norman, I can't accept this," Lucia exclaimed, shocked. "But you must," Norman replied firmly. "This is for your anniversary, the day you shared the ideas that turned my book into a bestseller." Norman explained that the money was a token of gratitude for the inspiration and insight Lucia had provided. The plot lines, characters, and themes in her novels, especially the romantic dynamics between nobles and commoners, had all been enriched by Lucia's unique perspective. Though initially hesitant, Lucia was touched by Norman's generosity. Their friendship had begun in simpler times. Back then, Norman struggled to captivate readers with her books, which featured commoner heroines. Publishers often pressured her to replace these characters with noble ones, insisting that only stories of grandeur would sell. Norman refused. Then Lucia stepped into her life. Using knowledge gleaned from both her dreams and real-world experiences, Lucia gave Norman an insider's understanding of social hierarchies, relationships, and the subtleties of noble life. With Lucia's input, Norman's book started to resonate with readers. In the early days, Norman barely made ends meet. Lucia had supported her, often bringing food from the palace. She never asked for repayment, but Norman, deeply grateful, promised to share her success if it ever came. And true to her word, Norman did. Now, as Norman pressed the envelope into Lucia's hands, her gratitude was evident. "You've been like family to me," she said. Lucia's voice trembled. "Meeting you was one of the best things in my life." Yet even as she accepted the money, a new worry gnawed at Lucia's mind. She had been planning to leave the palace, but the idea of running away now felt dangerous. The guards, bound by royal dignity, would undoubtedly pursue her. Worse, any connection to Norman might endanger her friend. Lucia reasoned that it might be wiser to wait until after her wedding to Count Metin to attempt an escape. Suddenly, a chilling memory from one of her dreams surfaced, leaving her uneasy. Norman noticed her pallor. "Lucia, are you all right?" she asked, concerned. Lucia deflected, pointing out that Norman looked more tired than she did. She encouraged Norman to rest, reassuring her that she was about to leave anyway. As she stepped outside, Lucia was struck by the bustling streets. The city was unusually lively. Curious, she asked Norman about the commotion. "All the knights are in the capital for revision," Norman explained. Lucia realized this must be connected to the recent end of the war. The thought of witnessing a celebratory parade excited her. For a moment, she allowed herself to indulge in the energy of the crowd. As she navigated the throng, she accidentally bumped into someone. She apologized quickly, but found herself distracted by the scale of the festivities. This was something new, something she had never seen, even in her dreams. Then she heard a name ripple through the crowd. "Tehran!" The cheers and murmurs grew louder. "Tehran," she repeated to herself. Was it the famed Black Lion of the battlefield? The possibility piqued her curiosity, drawing her toward the heart of the celebration. Duke Hugo Tehran. Who is he? A man whose name alone commands reverence. The military commander, known for his unmatched physical prowess and brilliant strategic mind. He is the Black Lionel of the battlefield, a figure who leads his armies to victory without fail. The title of Duke, with its prestige and power, is just one part of what makes him extraordinary. In my dream, I learned of his marriage 2 years into my own unfortunate union with Count Mathon. The news of his wedding created a stir, as the marriage of a man so central to the kingdom's power dynamics couldn't go unnoticed. His bride, however, was far from what anyone expected. She was an unassuming young lady, bright, cheerful, but lacking noble lineage, wealth, or connections. The union defied logic. There was no political advantage, no dowry to speak of. Whispers spread throughout the court, with many concluding that Duke Tehran must have been deeply in love. Yet not long after, rumors painted a different picture. The Duke had chosen a wife precisely because she posed no threat to the influence and legacy of the Terran family. The Duke himself never addressed these rumors, which only fueled the belief that they were true. Norman's frustration filled the room as she threw her pen down in defeat. Nothing comes to mind. Why don't you have a cup of tea to clear your head? Lucia suggested gently. Norman, her face glum, sighed heavily. I'm done for. I've got nothing left. You're writing a romance novel, aren't you? Lucia asked. Yes, Norman replied, almost pouting. Lucia leaned in, her voice thoughtful. How about this? A story about a contract marriage. A contract marriage? Norman echoed, intrigued. Yes, two people who marry to fulfill each other's needs. No love involved, just mutual benefits, Lucia explained. Norman's eyes lit up. That's brilliant! You're a genius, Lucia! She grabbed Lucia in a bear hug. Norman, let me go, Lucia protested, but she couldn't help but smile. Norman's enthusiasm was infectious. She immediately began jotting down notes, and as Lucia watched her, an idea began to take root in her own mind. A contract marriage. Lucia murmured to herself, I know what he needs, a wife who can play the role of the lady of the Duke's household. Should I go for it? The thought was tantalizing. Could this be her chance to change her destiny? The idea burned brighter in her mind. But then, reality hit. How would she meet someone as powerful as Duke Terran? Even the king couldn't easily summon him. Then she remembered. The victory party. The celebration of their triumph in the war was starting tonight. He would surely be there. He was, after all, the man who brought them their victory. The atmosphere in Duke Terran's chambers was tense. Kwaise Hesse, the crown prince, lounged casually, his cheerful demeanor at odds with the Duke's icy silence. Isn't it too dreary in here? You should hang up a painting or something, Kwaise said with a grin. The Duke didn't reply, merely looking at him with a pointed expression. Come on, Dukey, don't be so cold, Kwaise teased. Terran's voice was low and clipped. I was planning on attending the party. You didn't need to come here to make sure I did. Fine. I believe you, Kwaise replied with mock innocence. I only came because I want to go to the party with you. Terran silently cursed him. Kwaise could be endlessly annoying. I'm only attending the first night, Terran stated firmly. All right, just one night then, Kwaise said, holding his hands up in mock surrender. You know, Duke Esther, you're harder to persuade than the ladies. Nobody likes a desperate man, Terran replied coolly. Kwaise's eyes widened. Wait, was that a joke? Did you just make a joke, Dukey? Terran's expression didn't change, but inside, he felt a flicker of irritation. At the victory party, Lucia found herself weaving through the crowded hall. Her eyes scanned the room, searching. La Duke Terran must be here somewhere, she thought. Then she saw him. Towering above the crowd, he was impossible to miss. His dark hair and sharp features made him stand out, even in a room filled with nobles. But as always, he was surrounded by people vying for his attention. It's going to be difficult to get to him, she thought, her nerves tingling. But she couldn't deny it. He was handsome. Too handsome. Why do I always have a weakness for good-looking men? She lamented internally. Her determination wavered for a moment. She had spent 4 days at these celebrations, watching and waiting, hoping for the right moment to approach him. Time was slipping through her fingers, and she couldn't afford to waste any more. This is my last chance, she thought resolutely. I have to talk to him tonight. 4 days earlier, at the start of the celebrations, Kwaise had been pestering the Duke once again. Now that you're here, isn't this nice? We haven't been able to party during the war, Kwaise said, grinning. The Duke gave no reply, his patience wearing thin. Look, Dukey, you promised you'd help me, Kwaise pressed. I promised to help you after you became king, Terran corrected him. Who else would become king but me? Kwaise retorted indignantly. Let's talk again after you are king, Terran replied, his tone dismissive. You're too mean, Kwaise pouted, sulking. The Duke ignored him, his thoughts wandering. Until he felt it. A gaze. His eyes swept the room until they landed on hers. Their eyes locked briefly before she turned away. Kwaise broke the silence, nudging Duke Terran. Are you even listening, Duke? What did you say? Terran replied, his attention clearly elsewhere. Kwaise frowned. You weren't paying attention again, were you? Terran didn't answer, his mind occupied. He couldn't shake the thought of her hesitant gaze. It wasn't the same as the countless stares he'd grown accustomed to. Hers felt different, curious, uncertain. She had seemed like she wanted to speak to him, yet she never did. Even after the party ended, she didn't approach him. Over the next few days, Taryn found himself attending again, each time wondering if this would be the moment she would finally come forward. But all she did was watch him from afar, her expression unreadable. When will she talk to me? He thought, his patience wearing thin. On the 5th day of the party, she grew restless. Time was slipping away, and she still hadn't figured out how to approach him. Watching from a distance, she saw the Duke excuse himself and leave. Her pulse quickened. This might be her chance to catch him alone. Without hesitation, she followed, careful to remain unseen. She found him outside, his stride confident and purposeful. Just as she was about to call out to him, a woman approached. "Hugo," the woman said softly. The protagonist froze, retreating into the shadows. She recognized the newcomer, Sophia Lorenz. She couldn't resist eavesdropping as the conversation unfolded between Duke Taryn and his ex-lover. "Hugo," Sophia said again, her voice trembling. "Lady Lawrence," Taryn replied coldly. "You no longer have the right to call me by that name." The protagonist shivered at the frost in his tone. "You are so cruel," Sophia said, her voice breaking. "How can you be so heartless? I believed we were in love once." "You were mistaken," Taryn said flatly. "I don't fall in love with anyone." Sophia flinched at his words. You don't mean that. You can't. We shared so much. Fall into bed, perhaps," he interrupted, his tone sharp. "But love? Never." The protagonist gasped silently, unable to believe the cruelty of his words. "What did I do to deserve this?" Sophia asked, her voice laced with anguish. "I gave you my heart. I thought you cared for me." "And I told you not to," Taryn replied. "You promised you wouldn't." Tears streamed down Sophia's face as she turned away. "You truly are heartless," she whispered, her faith in him shattered. As Sophia left, her sobs fading into the distance, the protagonist remained frozen in place, her heart pounding. "What did I just witness?" she whispered to herself. "This man? He's not who I thought he was." For the first time, doubt crept into her mind. Have I chosen the wrong person? Before she could retreat, his voice broke through the silence. "Why don't you just come out?" Taryn said, his tone carrying a mix of curiosity and amusement. "No more hiding like a cat to eavesdrop." Her breath caught, and she stepped forward reluctantly. I apologize, Your Excellency," she stammered, her cheeks burning. "I didn't mean to overhear." Taryn raised an eyebrow, his expression calm but watchful. "Aren't you standing a bit far for a conversation?" he asked, a hint of challenge in his voice. Realizing her mistake, she stepped closer, her footsteps hesitant. "Oh," she mumbled, feeling even more self-conscious. The Duke observed her closely, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "This woman, she's like a small animal," he thought, amused by her timid demeanor. "Well?" he prompted. "What is it you wanted to say?" She took a deep breath, summoning her courage. Her voice faltered under his piercing gaze. "Haven't you been staring at me for days because you had something to say?" Taryn interjected, his tone teasing but expectant. Her face grew warm with embarrassment. So he noticed, she thought, feeling exposed. "What is it you wanted to say?" he asked again, his patience evident. I would like to propose a contract with Your Excellency," she finally managed to say, her voice firm despite her nervousness. Taryn's interest piqued, and he leaned in slightly, his expression unreadable. "A contract," he repeated. "Yes," she said, meeting his gaze with determination. "A life-changing contract." For a moment, he studied her silently, his curiosity growing. "Don't you think you need to introduce yourself first before making a proposal like that?" Lucia, undeterred, met his piercing gaze with steady determination. "I understand your caution," she began, "but revealing my identity and the details of the proposal here would be premature." The Duke nodded slightly, acknowledging her point. "Fair enough," he said, his composure intact despite the growing curiosity in his expression. "What is it that you seek, then?" Lucia hesitated momentarily, gathering her thoughts. "Would it be permissible for me to visit your residence?" she asked, her voice carrying a trace of apprehension. Duke Hugo's eyes narrowed, though his tone remained calm. "Of course," he replied, carefully masking his frustration. "But when do you plan to come?" "I cannot wait indefinitely for this contract of yours," he added, his impatience seeping through his words. I'll be in touch soon, Lucia assured him, maintaining her resolve despite the tension between them. The Duke's expression darkened slightly, his faint grin fading into a scowl. So I'm supposed to wait indefinitely for your convenience? He retorted sharply. Lucia forced a confident smile, refusing to falter. It's a risk, she said firmly, Kadad, but one that's necessary for a life-changing contract. Hugo regarded her silently for a moment, taking note of her composure. I hope you deliver what you've promised, he said finally. His voice was calm, but the impatience beneath it was unmistakable. I am not always so patient, you see. I'll keep that in mind, Lucia replied evenly, masking her unease as best as she could. As Duke Hugo left, Lucia remained rooted in place, her thoughts swirling. His commanding demeanor and sharp words lingered in her mind, unsettling her. Later that evening, Lucia sat alone in her room, restless and consumed by worry. The memory of the Duke's icy conversation with Sophia Lawrence replayed in her mind, sending a chill down her spine. What should I do? She muttered to herself. Her earlier confidence now felt like a distant memory. She hadn't anticipated the Duke's ruthlessness, and his casual threat to obliterate anything that angered him weighed heavily on her. I told him I had a proposal, she thought, biting her lip. But how will he react when he learns it's about a contract marriage? Fear gripped her as she imagined his potential anger. Sleep eluded her as she continued to mull over her options, feeling both cornered and uncertain. What I need right now is... She trailed off, unable to finish her thought. The next day, Lucia found herself on the balcony, holding an umbrella against the pouring rain. The storm mirrored her inner turmoil, each drop falling like a reminder of her indecision. Lucia? A voice called softly. She turned to see Norman standing in the doorway, concern etched across her face. Come inside. It's pouring out here, Norman urged. It's fine, Lucia replied, her voice barely audible over the rain. I'll come in once it eases up. Norman sighed and stepped out, offering her a steaming cup of tea. Is something troubling you? She asked, her tone gentle. Lucia hesitated but eventually nodded. I have a decision to make, she admitted. One path is difficult and painful if left unchecked. The other, it's uncertain. A gamble, really. I don't know which is the right choice. What would you choose if it were you? She asked, turning to Norman for guidance. Norman's answer was immediate. The unknown path, of course. Lucia blinked, surprised by her certainty. You didn't even hesitate, she remarked. Norman shrugged. Life's only livable when it's unpredictable, she said simply. If you know exactly what's coming, where's the excitement? And if the other path is certain to bring pain, why not take a chance on the unknown? Lucia listened intently, holding her cup close to her face. Norman's words resonated deeply. Even if the choice leads to pain, Norman continued, it's your decision. No regrets. Regrets? Lucia echoed softly, her thoughts drifting. Exactly, Norman said with a smile. You only get one chance at life, so you might as well own your choices. Lucia couldn't help but laugh at Norman's cheerful tone. Thank you, Norman, she said, feeling a renewed sense of strength. The next morning, Lucia made her way to Duke Hugo's residence. Her steps were hesitant as she approached the large gates, which stood ajar. The absence of guards or servants was unsettling, and doubt began to creep in. Should I go in? She wondered aloud, debating her next move. Just as she reached for the gate, a booming voice broke through the silence. Who is it? Lucia froze as a shadow emerged from the house. Her heart raced as the figure drew closer, the sound of heavy footsteps echoing in her ears. As the man's face came into view, recognition dawned on her. A mix of fear and unease settled in her chest. Lucia hesitated for a moment as the towering guard scrutinized her. You don't look like a servant here. What are you doing here? He asked, his voice firm and suspicious. Are you a knight of this manor? She ventured, trying to steady her voice. The man's sharp gaze didn't falter. And if I am? He replied, his tone brimming with authority. Gathering her courage, Lucia asked, Is His Excellency home? The guard folded his arms. Maybe. Why are you looking for His Excellency? His piercing eyes and massive frame made her momentarily falter, but she quickly composed herself. I've heard of you, she began cautiously. Your name is Roy Croton, isn't it? You're Duke Hugo's loyal subordinate. Roy's expression shifted ever so slightly at her words, though he said nothing. You're more widely known as Mad Dog Croton than by your actual name, Lucia continued. A red-headed knight of infamy, she added, her voice gaining confidence now that she was sure of his identity. Roy raised an eyebrow but remained silent. I'm sorry for intruding so suddenly, she said, but if you could tell Duke Hugo that I'm here, the person who proposed a contract at the victory party, I believe he will agree to meet me. Roy's face remained impassive as he shook his head. I don't know about that, he replied firmly. I can't send a stranger in to meet the Duke. Who are you? Leaning slightly toward her, his sheer size made Lucia take a step back. She thought, he's enormous. You don't look like a noblewoman, Roy added, his tone skeptical. Are you a merchant? Despite his imposing presence, Lucia squared her shoulders. Despite my inadequate attire, she replied with steady resolve, I am noble enough to meet with His Excellency. Roy smirked, an amused glint in his eye. Without another word, he turned and gestured for her to follow. In Duke Hugo's study, Roy entered casually, a grin on his face. My lord, he greeted in an almost playful tone. Hugo barely looked up before landing a sharp punch on Roy's face. I don't have time for you. Go play by yourself, the Duke said curtly. Roy groaned, rubbing his jaw. Humph, you always treat me like an immature child, he grumbled. Then, shifting to a more serious tone, he asked, Where's Jerome? Hugo replied disinterestedly, He went out. I heard why, but I forgot. Ignoring the dismissal, Roy leaned in. More importantly, you have a guest, he said. A guest? Hugo questioned, furrowing his brows. I don't recall having any appointments for the day. Roy's grin returned. She's not scheduled, but you'll want to meet her. Do you know her? Hugo asked, now intrigued. No, but she claims to be a noble. She doesn't look it, though, Roy replied with a shrug. No escort either. She's got guts, I'll give her that. Says she met you at the victory party and has something important to discuss. Realization dawned on Duke Hugo. It's her, he muttered, standing abruptly. Where did you put her? In the guest room, Roy said with a knowing smile. In the guest room, Lucia sat anxiously, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, and her heart raced. She whispered to herself, I've come this far. There's no turning back now. The door opened abruptly, and Duke Hugo stepped in, his commanding presence immediately filling the room. You really came, he said, his sharp gaze locking onto her. Lucia stood, startled by his sudden entrance. Your Excellency, she began, her voice faltering for a moment. You knew I was in? Hugo asked, his tone unreadable. Lucia nodded quickly. I apologize for not informing you beforehand. It was improper, she said, bowing slightly. Hugo took a seat across from her, his piercing eyes never leaving hers. Let's not waste time. Speak, he ordered. Taking a deep breath, Lucia straightened her back. I am late in introducing myself. My name is Vivian Hesse, she began. The 16th Princess of His Royal Highness. I have come to ask for your hand in marriage. The room fell silent. Hugo stared at her, his expression unreadable as he processed her bold declaration. Lucia felt the weight of the silence pressing down on her. Her thoughts raced. Does he not believe me? Should I have dressed more formally? Is he angry? Finally, Hugo broke the silence. Princess, he said slowly, his voice steady but with a note of incredulity. Yes, Lucia affirmed quickly, her heart pounding. Hugo leaned back in his chair, a hint of curiosity flashing in his eyes. At the victory party, you mentioned a proposal, he said. That's correct, Lucia replied, mustering all her courage. I am proposing a life-changing contract. A marriage contract, to be precise. It's a mutual arrangement that will benefit both of us. I am prepared to outline the details if you are willing to listen. Hugo's sharp gaze lingered on her, and Lucia held her breath, waiting for his response. Duke Hugo regarded Lucia with a measured gaze, his patience thinning. So what is it? What benefit would I derive from marrying Her Royal Highness? Lucia hesitated before summoning her courage. Your Excellency, I understand you have a son you wish to designate as your heir, she began. The Duke's expression remained unreadable as he sipped his tea. Undeterred, Lucia pressed on. To pass on your title, the law requires you to marry. And you propose that marriage be with you? Hugo asked. Yes, she confirmed. Hugo leaned back, speaking calmly. And what of those who might exploit this knowledge for blackmail? Lucia's eyes widened. Blackmail? Your Excellency, I assure you, I have no such intentions. My proposal is purely practical. She continued, outlining her reasoning. As the 16th princess, my royal ties hold little influence, and I lack a maternal family, meaning fewer entanglements. The dowry I bring is modest, but my royal status lends the arrangement a certain dignity. Hugo seemed intrigued by her preparation, but grew stern when she added, I will not interfere in your personal life. You may conduct yourself as you see fit. And if you wish, we could pursue a divorce later. The Duke's expression darkened. Divorce is not an option for the Terran family, he said coldly. Lucia hesitated before offering her final point. Your Excellency, I am unable to bear children. This eliminates potential complications regarding your heir. Hugo studied her silently, his thoughts guarded. Your Highness? He asked eventually. Yes? Let us assess each point, he began. The Terrans are not concerned with dowries or noble lineage. As for your assumption about my private affairs, do you take me for a man of such character? Lucia flushed. That's not what I meant. Hugo interrupted, his tone sharp. And yet you suggest I cannot deny it. Whether I do or not is none of your concern. Their exchange grew tense, each trying to hold their ground. Lucia realized her arguments were failing to sway him and decided on a new approach. What of the matter of heirs? She asked cautiously. Does my inability to conceive not resolve that concern? Hugo frowned, troubled by her casual demeanor regarding such a significant matter. Can you prove your infertility? He asked. Lucia looked down, shaken by the question. No, Your Excellency. Then it cannot be considered, Hugo replied firmly. Desperation gripped Lucia as she searched for a solution. Suddenly a memory stirred, his cold warning not to give her heart to him. Clarity struck. She met his gaze with newfound resolve. Then how about this? She proposed. I vow never to fall in love with you, Your Excellency. Hugo blinked, momentarily caught off guard. What? Lucia's voice was steady. I promise never to fall in love with you. For the first time, the Duke faltered, her unexpected offer leaving him unsettled. Duke Hugo couldn't help but laugh. Lucia, puzzled, wondered if her words had been amusing, but it was his knowledge of laughter that amused him. That's my favorite condition of all. However, Hugo confessed, he couldn't see how such terms could favor her. A wife indifferent to her husband's affairs, a marriage hanging by a thread, how do these benefit you? He asked. Lucia took a moment, her silence heavy, before she shared her burden. I desire to lead a life of my own choosing. As the 16th princess, I'm easily overlooked, a pawn for the royal family's benefit, she confided in Duke Hugo. Her wish was simple, to have some say in her future, to avoid living with regret. Her expression turned somber, revealing the depth of her fatigue and sadness. The Duke was speechless. Lucia excused herself, rising to leave. Wait, Duke Hugo called out, stopping her. In a moment that took her by surprise, he kissed her and stared into her eyes, explaining it was a test of their compatibility. If we are to marry, we should at least be comfortable with each other, without being disgusted, he reasoned, before stepping away to arrange for her carriage, leaving her momentarily alone. In the solitude of the room, Lucia was overwhelmed by a whirl of emotions. Tears of relief and happiness welled in her eyes as she blushed from the kiss. As she slid down and sat on the floor, she realized she had overlooked an essential aspect of marriage, the physical and emotional connection between partners. In his study, Duke Hugo found himself unable to concentrate on his work, his thoughts preoccupied with the recent encounter. He understood the necessity of marrying to secure his lineage, yet the situation with the princess was complicated. He recalled her pledge not to fall in love with him and their moment when he kissed her that had left her blushing. A memory he found unexpectedly charming. Despite the complications, Hugo knew that as long as they both adhered to the agreed-upon conditions, there should be no issues. Deciding to address another matter, he rang a bell on his desk, summoning assistance. The door opened, and a man entered. You rang? Your Excellency? He inquired, ready for instructions. Duke Hugo spoke. Fabian, there's something I need you to look into, he began, setting the stage for his next move. In another scene, Norman asked Lucia, So, how did it go? What do you mean? Lucia inquired, puzzled by Norman's question as Norman gracefully poured tea for them both. Norman, looking thoughtful, gently prodded, The question you had about choosing between two paths, it was about your own situation, wasn't it? Sensing the delicacy of the topic, Lucia added, I'm guessing it's something you can't discuss with me. Regrettably, Lucia confirmed, No, I can't. I'm sorry, Norman. Norman nodded, understandingly. Everyone has their secrets. Some they might not even share with their closest friends or family, she acknowledged, trying to offer comfort with a warm smile. I just thought you were facing a difficult choice and wondered if there was any way I could be of help. Your advice was very helpful, Lucia admitted, her spirits lifted by the conversation. Because of it, I decided to take a chance. Norman expressed her happiness at being able to help. Now I'm just waiting to see what happens next, Lucia said, reflective yet hopeful. I see. I hope it turns out exactly as you wish. Please let me know the outcome, Norman requested earnestly. Of course, Lucia agreed, feeling grateful for Norman's support and friendship. As Lucia later strolled through the street, contemplating her recent decisions and their potential outcomes, she was shocked when she encountered Fabian, who approached her with a sense of purpose. As she thought, that man was definitely. Her thought was interrupted when he showed her a sealed letter in his hands. I am here to escort you, he informed her, indicating the importance of the message he carried, leaving her confused. At night, the young man strolled with a lantern in hand, halting upon encountering Fabian. What are you doing here at this hour, Fabian? The young man inquired, his curiosity evident. Fabian, dismounting from his horse, asked, Has His Excellency retired yet? Jerome, taken aback, informed Fabian that the Excellency was not present. Frustrated, Fabian muttered about the bad timing and declared his intention to take the next day off. Did he go for a light stroll? To where? Fabian asked, holding a sealed parcel that caught Jerome's attention. Why, what is it? Jerome asked. Jerome revealed that the Excellency had gone to see Countess Falcon, which angered Fabian. Quiet! Everyone is asleep, Jerome urged, trying to pacify Fabian, who had shouted in disbelief. But he is still seeing that woman? What were you doing? Fabian demanded. Jerome, resigned, replied, What can I do? It's none of my business who my master brings to bed. None of your business? That woman is cursed. She's killed her last 3 husbands, Fabian remarked. Jerome dismissed it as foolish talk, causing tension between them. Fabian asked, I thought Duke Hugo was involved with Baron Lorenz's daughter, referring to the gesture of sending yellow roses as a breakup symbol. Oh, His Excellency never did that before. He's been seeing her for over a year now. She has him wrapped around her finger, Fabian remarked, which frustrated Jerome. Jerome warned Fabian to be careful with his words, thinking, how does he still not know him? But Fabian, ignoring the warning, stormed off into the night, vowing to give his report to the Duke immediately. Despite Jerome's attempts to call him back, Fabian continued on his way, holding the sealed parcel. Stopping briefly, Fabian turned to Jerome, insisting he wasn't making things up. Duke Hugo had pressed him for the parcel several times, surprising Jerome. In a different scene, the woman asked, What do you think? As Duke Hugo sat on her bed perusing a document. Not bad, he responded casually. Impressed, she remarked, You're too hard to please. It took me 2 months to compile this, and it contains highly classified information from our side. Duke Hugo, maintaining his composure with a smile, stated, An investor must be level-headed. Trying to entice him to lie down, she rubbed her hand across his chest and asked, Then, you will invest, won't you? Their intimate moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Madame, I must speak with you urgently, came the voice of the intruder. Annoyed, the woman shouted at the intruder to leave. However, the maid persisted, informing her that there was a visitor with important matters for the guest. As she was speaking, the visitor interrupted her. It's Jerome, Your Grace. I'm sorry to bother you while you're resting. Fabian is waiting for His Grace at the manor with some matters of importance. He said His Grace has pressed him on the matter. So I've come to inform you and see what His Grace thinks is best to do. Jerome conveyed to Duke Hugo, who was in the room with the woman. The room fell silent. Okay, wait there. I'll be right out, Duke Hugo instructed, surprising the woman. Where are my clothes? He asked her. In disbelief, she questioned if he was leaving. As he dressed, the woman hugged him from behind and mentioned she would be away from the house for about 10 days. Duke Hugo responded with a slight smirk. I see. He rode away in his chariot into the darkness while the woman watched from her window, expressing her desire awkwardly. Back in his study, Duke Hugo questioned Fabian. Is this all of it? Having reviewed Lucia's files. Fabian, apologizing, explained the thorough examination had taken longer due to the limited records. Observing the files, Duke Hugo acknowledged Fabian's competence in his job. So, she is indeed a princess, Duke Hugo thought as he looked at Lucia's picture. The gathered information revealed that Lucia was raised as a commoner, brought to the palace at age 12, had never left the palace, and only ventured out once a week in disguise. Despite not making her societal debut, she appeared at the party with ease, which intrigued Duke Hugo. Not drawing much attention at the party, Lucia didn't seem out of place either, Duke Hugo noted. Amused, he mentioned her ability to write her own permission letters to leave the palace without raising suspicion. The palace guards are pretty lax, Duke Hugo added with a laugh. Fabian reported that she had been identified as a handmaiden. I have searched thoroughly but found no ties to any factions, Fabian informed the Duke. The Duke speculated that Lucia might have gathered information about Damien, his son, from a novelist familiar with socialite gossip. Seeking clarity, Duke Hugo asked, "So the only confirmed fact is that she is a princess?" Feeling he hadn't done his best, Fabian stood dejected. Duke Hugo, growing serious, deduced, "She leaves the palace on the same day every week, so the next day she'll leave must be tomorrow." He instructed, "Tomorrow, bring her to me." "I shall go fetch her, Your Excellency," Fabian said with a bow. "All right," replied the Duke, dismissing his official. Alone, Duke Hugo began reflecting on his proposal for marriage. "I wasn't planning on rushing into it. I'll consider it like a coin toss. Heads if she comes back in the carriage, tails if she doesn't. Heads, I marry her, tails I don't," he thought. "Marriage is no big deal," he muttered to himself. "I am here to escort you," Fabian told Princess Lucia. Speechless, she struggled to find the right words. "You mean, right now?" she asked. "His Excellency would like to speak to you about your proposal," Fabian explained. "If you refuse, I'll leave in return," he added. For a moment, the princess considered her options. She noticed the carriage sent to pick her had no windows and no markings indicating it belonged to the Terrans. "It's so thorough, it's almost scary," she thought, clenching her fist. After a brief pause, she made up her mind. "I will go with you," she told Fabian, her expression determined. "This way," he said, leading her to the carriage. A knock came at the door, and Fabian entered Duke Hugo's study. He bowed, saying, "I have brought her here." "Is she alone?" Duke Hugo asked. "Yes," Fabian replied. "Did she come without resisting?" the Duke inquired. "Yes," Fabian answered. Smirking to himself, the Duke thought that the princess was interesting. She had no fear of what might happen. In the meeting room, Lucia picked up a cookie and tasted it. "This is absolutely delicious. Is it homemade?" she asked the steward, her eyes sparkling with delight. "Yes, it was made by the pâtissier of the Tarans," said the steward. "Wow, they are very talented," she commented. "Who is this lady?" The man thought he had never seen someone so relaxed at the Duke's mansion before. "I'm glad you like it," he told her. Though Lucia was nervous, she couldn't help but think that being the Duchess would have its perks, like drinking amazing tea and eating cookies every day. The steward then announced the presence of His Excellency, the Duke. This startled Lucia, and she choked on the cookie she had just eaten. No, my mouth is full of cookies," she thought, clutching her mouth. "Leave us," Duke Hugo instructed the steward before sitting down across from the princess. "I have to greet him," Lucia thought, quickly trying to swallow the food. She chewed as fast as she could, trying not to choke, grabbing her tea in a hurry. "It's caught in my throat," she thought, as she gulped the tea. "This is more embarrassing because it's so quiet," she thought, finally swallowing. The Duke sighed, then dropped a parcel on the table and slid it over to her. Speechless, Lucia picked up the document and opened it, unsure of what to make of the papers inside. "My terms for our marriage. You must sign both papers," Duke Hugo told her. She read through the terms silently. Relinquishment of parental authority, agreement to admittance into the family registry. As she read, Duke Hugo observed her. "She is not ugly, nor exceptionally beautiful, same for her body," he thought, observing her amber-colored eyes. "Is this it?" Princess Lucia asked, after finishing the document. The Duke was taken aback. "What about the things I mentioned last time?" she asked. "There was nothing that could be put into writing," he replied. "Really? Then don't you need the freedom of a personal life? And may I become clingy and profess my love for you? She asked. Then why don't I add those too? Just not on paper, Duke Hugo said, already showing signs of frustration from her questions. Right, she said, holding up the pen, about to sign the papers. What are you doing? Duke Hugo shouted, standing up. Signing, Lucia replied, matter-of-factly. No, I have shown you my terms. Doesn't Her Royal Highness have terms of her own? He was shocked by her actions. May I add my own terms as well? The princess asked, surprising him even more. Of course, the contract cannot be favorable to only one party, Duke Hugo replied. Terms, she said softly, thinking. Lucia remained seated, facing Duke Hugo, her voice steady despite the tension that thickened the air between them. So I may add my own terms to this marriage as well? She inquired, seeking clarity on her position in this arrangement. Of course, Hugo replied curtly, his tone firm and devoid of warmth. However, if we do not sign the contract today, consider the entire arrangement void, he added, his words carrying an unmistakable finality. Why? Princess Lucia asked, her curiosity piqued by his insistence. She needed to understand the urgency behind his ultimatum. The future is unpredictable, and too many delays only compound the uncertainties, Hugo explained coldly, though his words seemed less like a reason and more like a veiled warning. Lucia paused, weighing his strict stance. Though unsettled by his rigidity, she chose to press further, determined to uncover more of his guarded personality. May I ask you something? She ventured, keeping her tone measured. Why do you hate a woman's love? The boldness of her question hung in the air, and for a moment, time seemed to still. The silence that followed was heavy. Lucia began to regret her words, fearing she had overstepped and opened old wounds. Her earlier confidence wavered as guilt crept in. Hugo, meanwhile, was caught off guard. Not by the question itself, but by her perceptiveness. He studied her, wondering what had prompted her to ask. Have I asked something you cannot answer? She prompted gently, breaking the silence. Hugo's response was measured. No one has ever dared to ask me that, he admitted, a hint of vulnerability slipping through his composed demeanor. After a pause, he continued. I do not despise your question. However, I believe love should be mutual. Since I cannot return such affection, I would rather avoid it entirely. His words were straightforward, leaving no room for ambiguity. Lucia was taken aback by his admission. To her, it sounded more like self-preservation than anything else. Silently, she reflected on his perspective, finding it both selfish and deeply ingrained. But she pushed aside her judgment, knowing this was not the time to dwell on her thoughts. Instead, she gathered her resolve. I understand, she said firmly, but I need your word, Your Excellency. Swear upon your family's honor. Her serious demeanor piqued his curiosity. My family's honor? That carries significant weight. What do you request? He asked, intrigued. There are 2 conditions, she began. First, there will be no abuse, neither physical nor verbal. She clarified quickly, anticipating any misunderstanding. Hugo nodded, signaling his agreement, but prompted her for the second condition. Lucia hesitated briefly before speaking. Second, while I will do my best, the heart can act beyond our control. If I find myself unable to keep my heart from you, then send me a rose. Her voice wavered slightly, but her determination was clear. A rose, Hugo repeated, momentarily puzzled. Her request seemed oddly personal, touching on something he could not place. Hugo regarded her thoughtfully. You seem to misunderstand the gravity of the agreement you're about to sign, he said, his tone soft but firm. Lucia considered his words. Are you referring to financial conditions? She asked. Yes, he affirmed. But as a duchess, I wouldn't need to concern myself with such matters. I seek no wealth beyond what is necessary to live comfortably, she reasoned, surprising him with her practicality. Her simplicity intrigued him. What sort of princess concerns herself with such things? He mused internally, his interest in her growing. She elaborated further. Once one has enough to live comfortably, excess wealth does little to enhance happiness. What matters are the intangible aspects of life. Her words reflected an uncommon wisdom for her age. Did you not say you were 18? He asked, genuinely curious. I did, she replied with a calm smile. You speak with a maturity beyond your years, he noted, both puzzled and impressed. Lucia reiterated her terms, emphasizing their fairness. Hugo, after a brief pause, nodded. Your conditions are straightforward, he conceded, reaching for a pen. I agree to them. Lucia's face lit up with relief and happiness as she prepared to sign the contract. Yes, she said softly, the weight of uncertainty lifting from her shoulders. Their agreement, built on mutual understanding, marked a tentative yet hopeful beginning. Lucia and Duke. Hugo found themselves navigating the early stages of their engagement. When Duke Hugo pragmatically suggested notarizing their arrangement, Lucia promptly dismissed the idea, leaving him momentarily speechless. Yes, we are engaged to be married, Lucia confirmed, though she was still processing the reality of being Duke Hugo Terran's fiancée. Observing her thoughtful demeanor, Hugo probed her values, asking if she sought honor above all else. He then advised her to leave before nightfall, pointing out that she lacked permission to stay at his castle overnight. As Lucia reflected on his words, she noticed a subtle softening in his tone, a shift that stirred her thoughts and daydreams. The atmosphere shifted abruptly when Hugo accused Lucia of disguising herself as a housemaid and leaving the palace under false pretenses. His pointed remarks stunned her. He ordered her not to repeat such actions, his tone sharp and commanding. Struggling to understand the sudden change in demeanor, Lucia questioned his rudeness internally, wondering, why is he speaking to me like this? Hugo remained unapologetic, explaining that he didn't bother with formalities when addressing his woman. His casual use of the term embarrassed Lucia, who stammered as she questioned when she had become His Excellency's woman. Hugo reminded her of their agreement to marry, asserting the engagement's binding nature within the Terran family. This left Lucia momentarily speechless, as she hadn't fully grasped the weight of their commitment. Why can't you speak more courteously to your fiancé? Is that also tradition? Lucia asked pointedly. Hugo's response was blunt. No, that is just me. His straightforwardness only deepened Lucia's confusion. Initially intimidating, he now struck her as an enigmatic figure, difficult to categorize. She wondered if he might even be a philanderer, perplexed by his unpredictable demeanor. Hugo, returning to the matter of her unauthorized departure, pressed her for an answer. Are you going to respond? He asked seriously. Lucia, mustering boldness, questioned what he would do if she didn't. Hugo's cryptic reply, try me and see, reaffirmed her impression of him as a man who intimidated naturally. She silently reminded herself to tread carefully. Shifting the conversation, Lucia requested permission to see someone one more time. Hugo, thoughtful but composed, inquired, and if you do, what will you say? To her surprise, he seemed aware of her connection to Norman, even referring to her as Princess. Stunned by his insight, Lucia blushed at his familiarity. She expressed her desire to bid Norman farewell, prompting Hugo to clarify that he wasn't forbidding her from seeing her again. However, he reminded her that their engagement was a secret, emphasizing the need to avoid any potential scandal. Relieved by his understanding, Lucia asked if she could visit Norman even after their marriage. Hugo reluctantly agreed, but cautioned her against revealing the nature of their arrangement. Overjoyed, Lucia praised his consideration, though Hugo, slightly bemused, reminded her of her earlier judgment. Last time, you treated me like a philanderer, and now I'm considerate? How awful of a person do you think I am? He quipped. Caught off guard, Lucia clarified that her words weren't meant to insult him. Her sudden sadness didn't go unnoticed by Hugo, who reflected on her limited understanding of his complex character. Known to others as a man of many facets, some even calling him a monster, he realized Lucia might face challenges in reconciling her current perception with future revelations. Quietly, he anticipated that she might one day regret her current sentiments. Lucia wrote a heartfelt letter to Norman, assuring her of her well-being despite their temporary separation. Please don't worry about me, she wrote, emphasizing the enduring nature of their friendship. Concerned about Norman's disrupted sleep schedule, Lucia gently reminded her to prioritize her health. As she sealed the letter, she wondered how to ensure its safe delivery and anticipated that Duke Hugo might arrange for it. 5 days after her meeting with Duke Hugo at the manor, Lucia accepted that she wouldn't see Norman again until after her wedding. Reflecting on the uncertainty of the wedding date, she mused, I wonder when it will happen, a few months or a year from now. Her thoughts lingered on Norman, and she missed her deeply. While lost in thought, Lucia accidentally tipped her chair backward and landed on the floor with a surprised exclamation. Ouch, she sighed, lying there briefly before deciding to occupy herself with laundry. She stepped into the laundry bucket, lifted her dress, and began washing it vigorously, finding the repetitive task a welcome distraction. What's done is done, she thought. I'll just focus on my chores. Her focus was interrupted by a sharp voice. Are you a girl that works here? A court lady demanded, startling Lucia. Still standing in the bucket, Lucia hesitated, puzzled by the sudden encounter. The court lady pressed on, asking if the princess was in and ordering Lucia to lead her to her. Lucia, unsure how to respond, remained silent, thinking, does she believe I'm a servant? The court lady's persistence escalated. Answer me this minute, or are you unable to speak? Confused and caught off guard, Lucia wondered if the woman was at the wrong place. At that moment, Duke Hugo appeared, his tone laced with disapproval. I didn't know they'd added laundry to a lady's education, he remarked, eyeing Lucia with mild annoyance. Addressing the court lady, he continued, a servant of the palace doesn't even know the princess's face. How incompetent. Then, turning back to Lucia, he quipped, that's on you for having such a strange hobby, your royal highness. Lucia felt a surge of embarrassment and fear. Why is he here? She thought, stammering. Oh, hello. What brings you here? Hugo suggested she step out of the laundry bucket to talk. Attempting to comply, Lucia tripped and fell again. Frustrated, she thought, why am I falling so much today? Maybe I'll just pretend to be dead. Hugo, observing her predicament, offered his hand. She accepted, allowing him to pull her to her feet. Thank you, she said, relieved. Noticing she was barefoot, Hugo lifted her into his arms. Lucia, flustered, worried about getting soap on him, but he dismissed her concerns and carried her toward the manor, passing the speechless court lady. Inside, Hugo brought Lucia to her room, where maids awaited to assist her with a change of clothes. Surprised by their sudden attentiveness, Lucia wondered if they were making up for neglecting her earlier. Deciding not to dwell on it, she focused on preparing for her meeting with Hugo. Once dressed, Lucia joined Hugo in the parlor, still pondering the reason for his unexpected visit. Why had he come in person instead of sending a letter or a messenger? She couldn't help but feel a mix of curiosity and apprehension about what lay ahead. The maid carefully poured tea into fine porcelain cups as Duke Hugo and Lucia settled into their seats. Lucia marveled at the tea's exceptional quality, far superior to what she had in her palace. She wondered how the manor had acquired it so quickly. As Duke Hugo sipped his tea, he asked about her well-being, his tone genuinely interested. Oh yes, Lucia replied with a smile, thinking privately. He's polite when others are around, and giggled inwardly at the thought. Duke Hugo, seemingly unaware of her amusement, commented, You look healthy at least, unintentionally lightening the mood. Switching to a more serious tone, he said, I have something important to discuss. Ask the court ladies to leave and only keep your trusted handmaidens here. Lucia hesitated before admitting, I don't have handmaidens at the moment. Hugo frowned. Are they all out? He asked as she dismissed the few maids present. No. Lucia confessed simply. After a pause, Hugo suggested, Why don't we take a walk? Lucia agreed, and the two stepped outside to enjoy the serene weather. As they strolled, Duke Hugo observed Lucia's solitary lifestyle. Do you mistake yourself for a handmaiden? He asked, curious about her involvement in household chores. There's no one else to do it, Lucia replied matter-of-factly. What about the handmaidens? Hugo asked further. Lucia hesitated before admitting, I live here by myself. Hugo stopped walking and turned to her. You don't have handmaidens? You live alone in this side palace? Yes, Lucia replied simply. The cooking? The cleaning? You do it all? Yes, she said with a smile. It's not that difficult when it's just for me. Hugo studied her, astonished. How long have you lived like this? A few years, Lucia answered. Silent, Hugo mulled over Fabian's reports. He hadn't imagined that Lucia, a princess, lived entirely on her own. He recalled seeing her at the banquet hall in a plain dress, devoid of any finery. Suddenly, everything made sense. Her straightforward marriage proposal, the rushed terms of their agreement, and the desperation in her eyes. Hugo realized how much hardship she had faced, quietly enduring the life of a forgotten princess in solitude. Breaking his silence, Hugo said, I received His Majesty's permission to marry you this morning. The wedding will take place in less than a month. Lucia's eyes widened. So soon! You handle things quickly, she remarked, surprised by the sudden development. As they walked, Lucia brought up her handmaiden's absence. Hugo offered to address it, but Lucia quickly stopped him. Please don't. If you get involved, they'll face harsher punishment. I don't want that, she pleaded. You're being too forgiving, Hugo said, his tone critical. Perhaps, Lucia replied, but I liked being alone. I felt free, and it's better for your highness too. Hugo raised a brow. Better for me? How so? If I were a well-behaved princess locked in the palace, I'd never have dreamed of proposing to you, she confessed with a smile. Hugo couldn't argue with her logic. Turning toward her, he leaned in and kissed her. Startled, Lucia pulled back, covering her mouth as her cheeks flushed. As Hugo stepped away, he couldn't help but smile. Lucia's resilience and independence impressed him, confirming that she would make an excellent duchess. As Duke Hugo and Lucia strolled through the estate grounds, he mentioned casually, "Once we're married, I'll be heading north for a while." Lucia nodded quietly. The north? The Terran lands, she thought. The vast, barren region was notorious for its constant state of war. Uneasy, she kept her concerns to herself. Hugo brought up the wedding arrangements. I propose we have an informal ceremony. What do you think? Yes! That sounds perfect, Lucia responded quickly, relieved. The thought of her father, a man she'd never met, walking her down the aisle was unsettling. The only person she wanted at the wedding was Norman. Gathering her courage, Lucia said, Your Excellency, I have a favor to ask. Nervously, she handed him a letter. I'd like you to deliver this to a novelist named Norman. Taking the letter, Hugo confirmed, So, just deliver this. Yes, Lucia replied, clearly anxious despite the simplicity of the request. Thank you for doing this, she said with a smile. You're much nicer than I thought. Realizing her words might sound rude, she quickly backtracked. I mean, you're as nice as I expected. Hugo raised an eyebrow, amused by her nervous correction. Does she think I'm some kind of villain? He wondered. Still, her lack of fear toward him was refreshing. I must get going, Hugo said. Of course, Lucia replied. Before leaving, Hugo gave her a stern warning. Word will spread that I was here. People will take an interest in you, so don't go talking to just anyone, and don't meet every visitor who comes calling. Lucia tilted her head at his bluntness, but nodded. You should move to a more secure location, Hugo added. This place is too secluded. His Majesty will arrange it. Yes, all right, Lucia agreed, though she felt a pang of sadness. Memories of her father surfaced, but she said nothing, surprising Hugo. He recalled his meeting with the king, who had barely remembered Lucia's name. You want to marry my 16th daughter? The king had asked, laughing. She's very precious to me, he added before joking about the bride price. Despite the king's dismissive attitude, here Lucia was, content beside him. Anything else? Lucia asked. Having nothing further to discuss, Hugo excused himself. Back at his palace, Fabian confronted him. Where have you been? I told you not to go out alone. Hugo sat silently, letting Fabian's frustration wash over him. If you'd told me, I would have escorted you, Fabian said, bowing slightly. I was at the palace, Hugo replied. The palace? Fabian exclaimed. Did you see the crown prince? No, Hugo said, but I should have while I was there. Fabian, exasperated, pressed on. Why were you there? To get His Majesty's permission. I'm getting married, Hugo said flatly. Married? To the princess? Fabian stammered. Yes, within a month. Fabian was stunned. An informal wedding for a duke and a princess? That's unheard of, he muttered. Hugo dismissed his concerns. I'm heading north right after the wedding. Keep this quiet. Don't inform anyone back home. Fabian hesitated before asking, What about the bride price? I've already settled it, Hugo said. Use the mine on the St. Islands. That's far too much, Fabian protested. It's done, Hugo said, thus ending the discussion. As Fabian left, he reflected on the situation. An informal wedding? There's no war, so why the rush? Hugo's insistence on a simple ceremony puzzled him. He probably just finds it too troublesome. Fabian concluded that Hugo was as ruthless and self-serving as ever. Poor princess, Fabian thought. She'll be trapped in a marriage with a man who won't care about her happiness. Despite his doubts, Fabian prepared to follow Hugo's orders, wondering how the Duchess would cope with the man known for his arrogance and indifference. The next morning, a gentle knock at the door stirred Lucia from her thoughts. A handmaiden peeked inside, surprised to find her already awake and standing by the window. Oh, you're up early, princess, the handmaiden remarked, her tone both respectful and cheerful. You're always awake before I come to wake you. Lucia nodded silently, allowing the handmaiden to assist her with her hair and dressing. The princess couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as she adjusted to the newfound luxuries surrounding her. These helping hands. I'm not used to this life, she thought. The extravagant dresses, elaborate meals, and lack of responsibilities were far removed from her previous life. After relocating to the Rose Palace, a grand residence given to women favored by the king, Lucia explored her new surroundings. The palace was beautiful but vast, its emptiness only highlighting how lonely it felt. In the garden, she touched barren rose bushes, imagining how stunning they would be in full bloom during late spring. A hint of regret washed over her as she realized she might not stay long enough to see them flower. Later, while enjoying tea in her quarters, Lucia was interrupted by a butler. "Princess, His Majesty wishes to see you," he announced politely. The unexpected summons left Lucia puzzled. Why now? She wondered. He's never shown interest in me before. The butler explained that the king was unwell and wanted to see her immediately. Maintaining a calm demeanor, Lucia replied, "Please convey my wishes for His Majesty's swift recovery." The butler, caught off guard, hesitated. "Pardon?" he asked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. Lucia smiled faintly, masking her true feelings. "I'm feeling unwell and cannot go out," she added, dismissing the butler. Once alone, Lucia pondered her father's intentions. She concluded that he didn't want to see her as his daughter, but rather as Duke Terran's fiancée. Sipping her tea, she resolved not to pursue a relationship with him, silently asserting her independence. Elsewhere, the Crown Prince confronted Duke Hugo, expressing concern over his impending departure to the north. The Crown Prince emphasized the risks, noting that Hugo's presence served as a deterrent to those seeking retribution. Duke Hugo remained firm in his decision, dismissing the prince's worries. "Your safety doesn't depend on me staying," he argued. Frustrated, the Crown Prince insisted that Duke Hugo's absence would create instability. "Your presence alone keeps threats at bay," he said. Unmoved, Hugo questioned whether such reliance was truly beneficial. The conversation shifted to the spoils of war, with the Crown Prince claiming they belonged to him. Hugo refuted this, asserting that the spoils were rightfully his. "Everything you claim as yours is, in essence, mine," the Crown Prince said confidently. Hugo, unfazed, informed the prince of his plans to return in 2 years, potentially sooner if the crown passed during that time. This news further frustrated the Crown Prince, who demanded a shorter timeline. Hugo dismissed the demand, remaining resolute. Before leaving, Hugo revealed another surprise. His wedding was scheduled for the next day. The casual mention of marrying a princess left the Crown Prince stunned. "An informal wedding? Why am I only hearing about this now?" he muttered, furious at the lack of notice. As Hugo exited, the Crown Prince ordered his guards to investigate the matter. Grappling with the unexpected news, his frustration deepened as he considered Hugo's choice of bride. Why a princess? He thought, even musing over the idea of introducing Hugo to his own sister instead. Meanwhile, on the eve of her wedding, Lucia sat awake in her room, unable to sleep. The moonlight illuminated her thoughts as she stood by the window. Time has passed so quickly, she reflected. Tomorrow is the wedding. She stepped onto the balcony, taking in the unusually bright moon. Bittersweet emotions filled her as she acknowledged her uncertainty about the future. Resolving not to regret her decisions, she vowed to move forward with strength, no matter what challenges lay ahead. Lucia hadn't thought of herself as Vivian Hesse since the end of her 5-year dream marriage to Count Metten. For years, she had lived as Lucia, yet now, with her marriage to Duke Hugo, she found herself signing the wedding certificate with her former name. Vivian Hesse, Hugo Terran, the priest announced, sealing their union with a simple pronouncement, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." The ceremony was brief and informal, consisting only of signing the marriage certificate. On their way back to Terran Manor, Lucia gazed at the setting sun, distracted by her thoughts. The simplicity of the event didn't bother her, but as she observed Duke Hugo reviewing documents in the carriage, she couldn't help but reflect on the absence of a traditional kiss to seal their vows. His lips were soft, she recalled, blushing faintly as she touched her own. When Hugo interrupted her thoughts with a casual, "Tomorrow," she snapped back to reality and replied, "Yes," her face reddening further. Hugo, unaware of her inner turmoil, advised her not to shout, though her voice had barely been raised. He informed her of his plan to leave for the northern lands the next morning. "You'll stay here in the capital if you'd like," he added, his tone matter of fact. Startled, Lucia asked, "Excuse me, what did you just—" But Hugo cut her off, explaining that the north was dull compared to the capital, and she didn't need to accompany him. "I'll be there for at least 2 years, he said, returning to his paperwork. Lucia was taken aback. "We just got married, and he already wants us to live separately," she thought. Though briefly excited about the new chapter in her life, She realized their marriage was purely transactional. For Duke Hugo, it was simply a necessary formality. Why did I expect anything different? She asked herself. Summoning her resolve, she spoke up. I'll go with you, she said, though her voice wavered slightly. But if your excellency prefers me to stay in the capital, I will. Hugo, still focused on his files, replied without looking up, If you come, be prepared for the worst. He offered no further reassurance, leaving Lucia to quietly process her emotions. By the time they arrived at Terran Manor, Lucia felt a dull headache forming. They were greeted by a butler who introduced himself with a warm smile. Welcome, my lady. I am Jerome, the Duke's servant. Lucia returned the smile. A pleasure to meet you, Jerome. The cookies you sent last time were delicious, she said, recalling his thoughtful gesture. Jerome seemed surprised by her comment, but quickly recovered, thanking her and assuring her she could speak freely to him. Lucia, maintaining her composure, politely declined. I'm comfortable as I am, she said, adding an apology in case her manner of speaking went against the Terran family's customs. Jerome responded with a gentle smile. No need to apologize, my lady. You make the rules of the Terran family. He then asked if she'd like to eat, rest, or tour the manor. Feeling the weight of her headache, Lucia pressed her temple. I'd like to rest, she decided, dismissing Jerome's concern over her discomfort. Once shown to her bedroom, Lucia took a bath and lay down, her thoughts drifting as exhaustion overtook her. All I did today was get married. Why am I so tired? She murmured. Well, I guess marriage is a big task. She reflected on Duke Hugo's indifferent demeanor and the significance, or lack thereof, of their union. Closing her eyes, she promised herself she'd feel better after resting. She awoke hours later to the sound of a handmaiden's voice. My lady, would you like to have dinner before returning to sleep? The handmaiden asked. How long was I asleep? Lucia inquired, surprised to hear she'd rested for 6 hours. Her headache was gone, leaving her feeling more like herself. As she prepared for dinner, she asked about Duke Hugo, only to learn that he typically dined in his office when preoccupied with work. I'm having dinner alone? She thought, disappointed but unsurprised. Her new life as Vivian Hesse, Duchess of Terran, was proving to be lonelier than she had anticipated. After finishing her meal, Lucia thanked the handmaiden and decided to take a leisurely stroll around Terran Manor. The absence of Duke Hugo at their wedding dinner lingered in her mind, stirring a quiet frustration. We're under the same roof. Is that so hard? She muttered under her breath, pausing mid-step. She reminded herself of her vow not to raise her expectations, yet the disappointment gnawed at her. I said I wouldn't get my hopes up. Why am I feeling like this? She questioned, shielding her eyes from the sunlight. This is the reality I agreed to. A secure home, nothing more. Interrupting her thoughts, Jerome's voice called out, offering to guide her through the manor. Accepting his offer, Lucia followed him as they began exploring. The manor's sheer size overwhelmed her, and Jerome cautioned her about the grand staircase, hinting at the seemingly endless journey needed to explore every corner. Curious about the estate's history, Lucia asked if it had always belonged to the Terran family. Jerome explained that the manor was acquired only a few years ago, as the Terrans previously did not own a property in the capital. Who lived here before? Such a large house with gardens must have belonged to a high nobleman or someone wealthy, Lucia remarked. To her surprise, Jerome revealed that the Terran family had purchased and demolished over 100 houses, leaving only the main mansion standing. Lucia's eyes widened at the scale of the operation. The realization deepened her understanding of the family's vast wealth. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask, Jerome offered. Lucia nodded, shifting the conversation to the handmaidens attending her. She observed that her current handmaiden seemed more experienced than she had expected. Is there a reason for her assignment? She inquired. Apologizing for not clarifying earlier, Jerome explained that the handmaidens assisting her now were only for her brief stay in the capital. When she moved to the north, a new group would take over. Lucia, curious about their lives, asked if the current handmaidens had homes or if they were bound to the estate. Jerome confirmed that they stayed nearby and mentioned that the handmaidens traveling with her would have their roles adjusted according to age and experience. Relieved by the explanation, Lucia thanked Jerome, who silently admired her as a thoughtful and considerate lady of the house. As night fell, Lucia returned to her room, where the handmaiden offered to apply flower oil to her skin, a practice believed to enhance smoothness. While the handmaiden worked, Lucia found her thoughts drifting to Duke Hugo. She wondered if he would visit her that night, though she hadn't seen him since their arrival. Reasoning with herself, Lucia thought, he likely doesn't see the need, especially since he already has an heir. This marriage was never about love, just ensuring his son's position. Her speculation about the Duke's intentions led her to conclude that keeping their distance might be for the best. Despite her resolve, the memory of their brief kisses made her heart race, and she blushed at the thought of anything more. Abruptly sitting up, Lucia decided to refocus her thoughts. She glanced at a painting on the wall, contemplating her new role as Duchess. Social gatherings and aristocratic duties weren't her strength, and she couldn't help but compare herself to the ideal she had envisioned in her dreams. Thinking back, she exclaimed aloud, "That woman!" Recalling the woman who was supposed to marry Duke Hugo in her dream, Lucia wondered what had become of her. Shaking her head, she dismissed the thought. It doesn't matter. This marriage was my choice, a necessary one for survival. Spotting a bottle of wine on the table, Lucia decided to toast her first day as a duchess with a single glass. However, she soon realized she had consumed the entire bottle. Flushed and overheated, she debated whether to undress. Concluding that she was alone in her own bedroom, she stripped down to her underwear, convincing herself that this small act of freedom was her right as the orchestrator of her new future. Feeling the effects of the wine, Lucia decided to hydrate herself with water. Unbeknownst to her, Duke Hugo entered the room in his nightrobe, stopping in his tracks at the sight of his wife unexpectedly undressed. He stood silently, watching as Lucia froze in place, stunned by his sudden appearance. As Duke Hugo entered the room, he froze at the sight of Lucia standing unclothed. Startled, Lucia exclaimed inwardly, "Duke Taran, why is he here?" In her panic, the cup she had been holding slipped from her hands, shattering on the floor. Flinching, she stood frozen as Duke Hugo quickly instructed, "Don't move." He approached her cautiously, then lifted her into his arms. Embarrassment flooded her cheeks. "Again? He's carrying me without even asking," she thought as he carried her to the bed. Gently placing her down, Duke Hugo examined her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Flustered, Lucia assured him she was fine and hurriedly pulled the bedsheet over herself, her face burning with embarrassment. Her heart raced as Duke Hugo quirked a brow and said dryly, "You welcomed me in the nude, and now you're shy?" "I didn't welcome you," Lucia snapped. "I didn't know you'd come in. I didn't even expect you." She paused, horrified as he raised a brow. "This is my bedroom," he stated firmly, as if explaining the obvious. Lucia blinked, shocked. "But Jerome said this was my room. He didn't say it was yours, too." Stammering, she asked, "Is it Tehran family tradition for husbands and wives to share chambers?" A faint smirk tugged at his lips as he acknowledged the butler's possible miscommunication. "It seems Jerome didn't clarify," he said, his tone unreadable. Trying to shift the subject, Hugo asked why she was undressed. Embarrassed, Lucia explained she had felt overheated. His sharp eyes caught sight of the empty wine bottle near the bed. "And the wine," Lucia hesitated, then confessed, "I drank some." "Some?" he echoed, tilting his head toward the empty bottle. Realizing her mistake, Lucia flushed with guilt. "I didn't know it was your wine," she mumbled. A sardonic glint flashed in his eyes. "Drinking, stripping, and waiting for me in my room." "Quite the coincidence," he remarked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "That's not what happened," Lucia protested, heat rising to her face. "I didn't even know this was your room, let alone expect you." She scowled at his self-assured tone, privately questioning his inflated ego. Then, trying to compose herself, she added, "Even if I was waiting for you as your wife, wouldn't that be my right?" Hugo regarded her in silence, and Lucia panicked. "Did I overstep? Does he hate when people talk back to him?" she wondered. To her surprise, he apologized, his tone measured. "I misjudged the situation," he said, catching her off guard. Lucia blinked in shock. "You're apologizing?" He raised an eyebrow. "Is that surprising?" "Honestly, yes," she admitted. "I thought someone like you never apologized." "Someone like me?" he repeated, intrigued. "I mean," she hesitated, "I just assumed you'd be more commanding." Hugo turned away briefly, his lips twitching with a faint smile. "No one's ever said such harsh words to my face before," he admitted, though his tone lacked offense. Lucia quickly backtracked. I didn't mean to be harsh. Please don't hold it against me. It was just my opinion. He studied her in silence before his gaze softened, captivated by her earnestness. Those eyes, he thought. She was like this from the start, genuine and unwavering. I couldn't look away then, and I can't look away now. The room hung in a charged silence until Hugo leaned closer. Now then, he began, his voice low. Since you're the only woman with the right to be in my bed, why didn't you think I'd come to you? It's our wedding night, after all. Before Lucia could respond, he tugged the sheet from her grasp, leaving her bare. She froze, her mind racing. This marriage isn't about love or desire. He doesn't want another child, she reminded herself. You're leaving for the north tomorrow, she said cautiously. Hugo stilled, meeting her gaze. Nothing will happen without your consent, he assured her. Lucia's heart clenched at his unexpected restraint. I wouldn't refuse tonight, she said softly, her voice trembling. It's our wedding night. Hugo's brow furrowed as he leaned closer, his tone warning. If we start, there's no stopping. Are you ready for that? Lucia hesitated, the shadows of her past flashing in her mind. Memories of her haunting dream of Count Metten. Trembling, she raised her hand and placed it lightly on his chest. It's not a matter of readiness, she murmured. Her eyes met his, glistening with determination. I'm not afraid. Not with him. Hugo watched her in silence, captivated by her courage and vulnerability. Hugo kissed Lucia's hand gently, his lips lingering as he trailed down her skin. The unexpected gesture made her flush, and she flinched instinctively. Surprised, she stammered, Your Grace? As he softly guided her to recline. My name, he said, his tone calm. Huh? Lucia replied, confused. I don't want to be called by titles here. Call me by my name, he instructed gently. Your name, she asked hesitantly. Don't tell me you don't know it, he said, raising an eyebrow. Of course I do, she answered quickly, flustered. Hugh? She added uncertainly. He observed her with a faint smile. Just now, he said softly, the way you said it. Maybe I'll call you Hugo, she suggested cautiously. No, he dismissed, shaking his head. Huh? She said, looking puzzled. I liked what you called me just now, he replied. Hugh? She repeated, unsure. He leaned closer with a calm expression. Vivian, he said deliberately. Lucia fidgeted slightly, shy under his gaze. I'm not used to being called by my name, she admitted softly. You'll get used to it, he assured her with a faint smirk. Vivian? Her blush deepened, and she avoided his eyes. After a pause, he remarked, You're more headstrong than you look. I am not, she protested. Yes, you are, he countered, his tone light. Then what does that make you? You always ask for the most unreasonable things, she replied. That's because I'm always right, he said, leaning closer. Their lips met in a deep kiss, an intimate moment stretching between them. When they briefly parted, their eyes met, and they leaned in again, sharing another. Noticing her uneven breathing, Hugo paused and gently guided her hands to his neck. Breathe through your nose, he said calmly. Lucia murmured softly, Oh! Still uncertain. Don't worry, he reassured her. He continued, his touch soft and deliberate, making her flinch slightly. Taking her hands, he kissed them and whispered, Relax. As she adjusted to the moment, Lucia let out a soft gasp, her body instinctively tensing. It's uncomfortable, she admitted, her voice trembling. Try to relax, he said, his tone gentle and steady. Lucia covered her mouth, trembling slightly as she adapted to the situation. Shh, he murmured, pausing briefly. Huh? She said softly, unsure of herself. Hugo studied her, his thoughts clouded by her presence. Her scent, her softness, and her quiet strength drew him in. He marveled at how she made him lose all sense of time and place. The connection between them deepened naturally, as they gave in to the raw emotions of the moment, letting it unfold without haste. Thank you for watching this episode of our Manhwa recap. We hope you enjoyed diving into the world of this story with us. If you loved the content, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring you even more amazing manhwa recaps. See you in the next episode.